Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Lesson 7, Past and Present Audiences, Introduction to Audience Context, all right, part of Component 1, Exploring Media Products, Creative Media Production, BTEC. So part of the Do Now task, look at the two front covers of Doctor Who magazine. What can you say about how their primary audiences changed, right? Remember to use your audience map. So look at the two front covers of the Doctor Who magazine. What can you say about how their primary audience has changed? Pause the video, take 5 minutes and look at these two products. Okay, so learning objectives for today: to understand that audience have changed and developed over time as well as products. All right, learning objectives: we must be able to understand the difference between past and present audiences. You should be able to interpret how traditional audiences, passive audiences, and modern audiences, active audiences, work. You could be able to support your understanding with evidence by analysing the media product, and as with all of these videos in this series, it links to Learning Aim A to analyse and support past and present products throughout the three different sectors and how they target specifically audiences. So if we review the Do Now task, okay, now this is Doctor Who Weekly. It was published by Marvel Comics and it was published weekly, produced by the BBC, because obviously Doctor Who make BBC. Primary target audience, 11 to 18 year olds, with an interest in sci-fi, predominantly male, right? So if we look at this, it's got a bright colour scheme which suggests a younger audience. It's got free gifts to include, which involve you decorating your bedrooms, such as pull-outs, pin-ups, comic strips, and free transfers, allowing the audience to build an identity around the show. Right now, it's quite unlikely that older people are or people outside this age group are going to have pin-ups on their rooms or posters on their in their bedrooms. So that's where you can kind of stop the age demographic from moving on further. But obviously you've got a male protagonist in Doctor Who, right? So it appears as a role model, and therefore more identifiably with men. And stereotypically, men are more interested in sci-fi, right? These are changing, but all work to support the presence of a more passive traditional audience. All right. There's also prize winning competition appeals to an audience's sense of value. Right. So they're not just purchasing the magazine; they're also having the chance to win merchandise. So if we compare that to Doctor Who magazine, this is now produced by Panini Comics and produced monthly. Again, the BBC, but this is now produced monthly as opposed to weekly. Male target audience again, majoritatively, but 18 to 47 years of age with interest in sci-fi. We've got a dark red and black colour scheme. It has a sort of darker narrative, conventionally associated with horror. All right. You've got less giveaways, and there's more of a variety of articles to enrich the audience's knowledge of the TV programme, including interviews with writers and directors. Right, so this means that it's more of a mature audience, a more mature male. As we can see that Doctor Who is there again, another protagonist as a central image, and the variety that is there would support a more active audience. You know, we're in an information age where people want information, and this has almost been set up to mimic things like film review or total film. It's developed for a specialist and niche audience who want to know more about Doctor Who. So how has the purpose changed? All right, the BBC originally created Doctor Who in 1963, and they created it because they wanted the audiences to explore interests around science and history. This is because the BBC is a public service broadcaster, all right, which means that we own them. All right, we pay the license fee, we pay the TV license fee, and as a public service broadcaster, you need to inform, educate, and entertain. All right, so the science and history certainly plays to that educating part. Now, a public service broadcaster doesn't make any money. All right, they are publicly funded, generally through a tax or through, in our case, the license fee. All right, and they have to be impartial. They're not allowed to be biased, and they have to reflect the cultural diversity of the UK. Right, so this is quite strong in the UK in terms of a public service broadcaster, because we bind the BBC to its mission statement to educate, entertain, and inform by something called a Royal Charter, right, which is a legal document that is awarded by the King or Queen to a company or organisation, and it outlines their purpose and guarantees an independence, right? So what they're designed to do, or a public service broadcaster is designed to do, is to give you programming that informs, educates, and entertains. So for any of you that have watched Doctor Who, you'll notice that he's a Time Lord, so he travels through time and space. And what this does is it allows the audience to experience different time periods from around the world, exploring different cultures, looking at technology, explaining how the science works, and he travels with his companion. So Doctor Who very much fulfills the BBC remit as a public service broadcaster to educate, entertain, and inform, and therefore its purpose is the same. So it works really, really well. Now, it's always important to think of something. The only other public service broadcaster that is in the UK is Channel 4, right? And their remit is to be innovative and is mainly focused to cater to minority groupings, gay, lesbians, ethnic minorities, religious minority denominations, etc. All right, but the BBC is what we have to understand. Now, moving on. The change, all right, now I spoke in the previous lesson about traditional and modern campaigns. Right, now traditional campaigns and traditional audiences, these people right here, all right, is what we're going to kind of look at. Now, traditional audiences in the past, all right, would consume in their daily basis a sort of very rigid way, a very sort of stereotypical way. So in the morning, they would commute to work reading the newspaper. They'd probably read their latest magazine or the Times, Guardian. At lunch, they'd probably continue reading that newspaper. Maybe they might pop to the pub, watch a race, whatever, but it'd be very limited. In the afternoon, they'd probably pick up a newspaper again. The Evening Standard is very much a cultural significance within London in terms of commuters picking it up and reading it on the way home. In the evening, right, was much more focused around family time. So the family would eat together. Maybe some of you guys still do. It's a bit of a hangover. I certainly did when I was living with my parents. And they would watch the TV for a bit together, all right, and they'd watch it as a family until the children went to bed, and then they might watch it as a couple. Now, during this time, and you're talking probably pre-internet, Saturday night television was massive, all right? You had Noel Edmonds and Mr. Blobby there, all right? The whole family would come together and watch Saturday night television, right? So it was very formulaic. The audience or producers, TV channels knew who was watching and when, right, in a very kind of stereotypical manner based on time of day and what they did in terms of their demographic. So this made a passive audience, all right? They consumed media, but they didn't comment on it, all right? They don't question, they accept what is being said. So audiences' patterns of consumption is what we called, or what we call this. All right, the BBC knew what people, or BBC channels know what people are likely to watch and at what time they are likely to watch it. So schedulers were able to put on programmes that spoke to those audiences. And for commercial TV channels, they were able to advertise products within the commercial breaks to the audience that were watching. All right, so this is all quite stereotypical, but in contrast, present modern day audiences have a different element, and that is because they have technology and digital in the palm of their hands. So with the birth of the internet, really did change how modern audiences consumed media. So in the morning, for example, as shown in this image, people aren't on reading newspapers anymore. Some maybe. Most people are on their new mobile phones. They're consuming BBC News. They might be looking at any of the Sky apps that go on. They might be watching Prime Video. They might be playing a game. All right. So the idea is that audiences have a variety of choice that can then feed to their needs. They might be reading the newspaper on their iPhone. All right. But that's what I'm trying to get across. People can consume media any time of day, any which way they wish to. So when it comes to lunch and afternoon, they might choose to go back into their game. They might choose to finish off watching the programme that they were watching on Prime Video. They might look at the news article that they are reading. In the evening, they'll come home, they'll sit there and watch a programme. The kids will have second screens, so you guys might be watching the programme, but you'll probably be playing something on your computer or PlayStation. They might be watching something on Sky Q from yesterday, Netflix, Disney Plus, iPlayer. All right. So the birth of the internet really changed as technology improved. Audiences were able to access products wherever and whenever they wanted. All right. And with the birth of the internet came the digital and information age. All right. Content for production rocketed. All right, so because you've got all these people accessing content all the time, it meant that content rose. People had to produce more content. News and journalists had to get the next story, not for the next morning, but for the next minute, for the next hour. They needed to make sure that they were getting ahead of other people before they got the story. Technology companies were wanting to develop the better game before they had their competitors, and data was being recorded all the time. All right, now we will go into these in later lessons, but data is now informing what products are. When you're watching Netflix, for example, Netflix are watching what audiences are generally watching, collecting that data, and then trying to predict what is going to be the new next thing, and therefore create a program in that way. The same way music artists are becoming quite manufactured. They're now reliant on algorithms to predict what artist will be successful or creating a new artist. But we'll go into that. So modern audiences have changed, right? They've become more active audiences because you can watch a program and go, oh, that was naff, I'm going to share it on Facebook and tell everyone how rubbish it was. All right, you can inform people, you can change people's opinions. You can watch music, you can listen to music when you want. So you've got older audiences, which are assumed to be passive, they'll accept what was going on, and active audiences, which are there to question, to investigate, but essentially get more involved in the media product because they have the chance to do so via iPhones, etc. So this is your main comparative task, all right? I want you to watch the three trailers from Doctor Who. The one from 1963, the original, 1982 and 2010. Now, what you've got to bear in mind just before you do this, all right, is Doctor Who is one of the oldest running TV programmes, okay, for the BBC. It has run for a very long time, since 1963. It got cancelled for a little bit, but then got rebooted. And became even more successful. So successful, so much so that even in Gay Pride one year, they actually showcased it on a massive screen, not just one screen, but several screens, because they were worried that people would rather watch the final of the season at home, because it featured Billie Piper, who was a popular gay icon, than turn up to Pride. All right, so turn up to Pride. And so they actually put these massive screens on so that essentially that didn't happen. Now, since 1963, it's remained on the diet. So you've got to think, if you were a kid in 1963, you want to still see some of that stuff that is from 1963, some of those different characters, maybe some of those different villains. Even in 1982, but 2010, but you will have changed, all right? So you will have a change, and you will have changed and the product does change over time. And that's what I want you to try and establish. I want you to think with these three products, all right, with these three trailers, I want you to think about who the primary and secondary audience are of the trailer. Has this audience changed over time from 1963, 1982 to 2010? What are the purpose of each of these trailers, and how do they fulfil the BBC's mission statement or their remit to educate, entertain and inform? All right, so consider things like the actors, characters, storylines and technology featured. All right, pause this video, watch those three. They're embedded in here, and you should be able to just click them and they'll play. But pause it, give yourself 40 minutes. So this is your independent exploration task, okay? I'd like you to explore the Doctor Who website, all right, considering the primary and secondary audiences. As well as that, I want you to investigate further the purpose of different media products featured on the sites, okay? So explore the fun and games section. Find 3 different activities and write a one-line sentence creating an audience lifestyle profile for each of the activities you have looked at. Right? You could even explore the Doctor Who app, right, if you have a smartphone. As a bit of a research extension, I want you to research into Ghostbusters from 1984 and compare it to the remake in 2016. Right? How has the audience purpose changed? What was the reboot of Ghostbusters? Was it as successful as that of Doctor Who? Make sure you give reasons to support your answers. So that's your main independent explorationary task. Pause the video, give yourself half an hour. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like you to upload your research response to Teams into the relevant folder. So that would be folder 7. With the research profiles of similar products that you've researched into, and I hope that you now understand that audiences have changed and developed over time, and therefore products do as well. And I hope you understand the difference between past and present audiences, how traditional audiences are passive and more modern are active, and I hope you're able to support that with evidence. So, take care guys, and see you next lesson.